I wrote a book called Explanations and Corrections in the Gospel of Luke, and some of those explanations are in Luke 21:25 through 26. He explains some complicated and misunderstood metaphors in Mark and Matthew about the darkening of the sun and moon, and also the stars falling from heaven, and even a Isaiah 5:30, a complicated scripture I'll get into later. They're different metaphors, they all have the same meaning. So I'll start covering this chapter, metaphors combining the sun, moon, and stars, because the previous chapter in the previous episode was about just the sun and the moon, which is more common in the Bible. This chapter continues a digression about the metaphor of darkness in the Bible. Mark 13:24 through 25 says, "But in those days, after that tribulation, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall be fallen from heaven, and the powers that are in the heavens shall be shaken." Revelation 6:12 through 13 is similar. Some scholars think that the clause about stars fallen from heaven is derived from a denunciation of Edom in Isaiah 34:4. "And all the host of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heavens shall be rolled together as a scroll, and all of their hosts shall fade away, as the leaf fadeth from off the vine, and as a fading leaf from the fig tree." So this is highly metaphorical and doesn't use the word fall, but it seems to describe the disappearance of the stars from heaven. In his comments on Isaiah 13:10, Albert Barnes says, "For the stars of heaven." This verse cannot be understood literally, but is a metaphorical representation of the calamities that were coming upon Babylon. The meaning of this figure evidently is that those calamities would be such as would be appropriately denoted by the sudden extinguishment of the stars, the sun, and the moon. As no calamity could be greater than that, nothing would tend more to anarchy, distress, and ruin than thus to have all the lights of heaven suddenly and forever quenched. This was an apt and forcible representation of the awful calamities that were coming upon people. Darkness and light in the scriptures are often the emblem of calamity and distress. See note on Matthew 24:29. The revolutions and destructions of kingdoms and nations are often represented in the scriptures under this image, and any great calamity is illustrated in this manner. So respecting the destruction of Idumea. The metaphors of Mark, Matthew, and Revelation may have originated by combining Isaiah 34:4 with Isaiah 13:9 through 10. Isaiah 13:9 through 10, which Albert Barnes just commented on, says, "Behold, the day of Jehovah cometh, cruel with wrath and fierce anger, to make the land a desolation, and to destroy the sinners thereof out of it. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light. The sun shall be darkened in its going forth, and the moon shall not cause its light to shine." So this passage in Isaiah 13 seems to be enough, except it doesn't actually say the stars would fall from heaven. It says something like that in Isaiah 34. Maybe Jesus appropriated recognizable metaphors from Isaiah, which were originally directed against Babylon and Edom. This would be reasonable since Rome was also an enemy of Israel. I will later show that Luke 21:25 through 27 refers to the Gentiles who experienced sudden terror after seeing the Son of Man in heaven. Moses Stewart wrote, "So when in the Oriental writers the sun is represented as darkening, the moon is obscured, and the stars is shaken, these are images of distressing times And therefore, when it is said that these things will happen, the simple meaning is that times of great distress will follow, in which, as it were, all nature seems to threaten to ruin. Albert Barnes wrote in his commentary on Matthew 24:29, the images here used are not to be taken literally. They are often used by the sacred writers to denote any great calamities, as the darkening of the sun and moon and the falling of the stars would be an inexpressible calamity, so any great catastrophe, any overturning of kingdoms or cities, or dethroning of kings and princes, is represented by the darkening of the sun and moon and by some terrible convulsions in the elements. Thus the destruction of Babylon is foretold in similar terms in Isaiah 13:10, and of Tyre, Isaiah 34:23. The slaughter in Basra and Idumea is predicted in the same language, Isaiah 34:4. Then he refers to several other scriptures and says, to the description in Matthew, Luke has added, in Luke 21:25, there should be distress of nations with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth. All these are figures of great and terrible calamity. The roaring of the waves of the sea denotes great tumult and affliction among the people. Perplexity means doubt, anxiety, not knowing what to do to escape. Men's hearts should fail them from fear, or by reason of fear. Their fears would be so great as to take away their courage and strength. So I like to quote people who, to some degree, support the things I'm trying to say, and so other people have said for me a lot, so I don't need to try to prove it on my own. That is to say that the sun and the moon and the stars darkening, or the stars disappearing, are symbols of calamity. And Albert Barnes even adds to this that in Luke 21:25, this reference, I don't know if he says it's from Isaiah 5, no, I don't think he knew it was from Isaiah 5, but this additional reference about the sea and the waves roaring has the same meaning. Moses Stewart and Albert Barnes reasoned like Luke. Besides them, some late Latin writers gave good explanations of the metaphors about the darkening of the sun, moon, and stars. Cornelius a Lapid's comments on Matthew 24:29 and on Isaiah 13:10 and 34:4, and also Jacobus Tyrannus' comments on Isaiah 13:10 and 34:4. And the reason I'm citing such obscure Latin writers is when I try to find things to back up my opinions, it's that hard sometimes. In the next chapter, I will begin to explain precisely how Luke derived and constructed the verse in Luke 21 that Barnes referred to in the quotation above. So the next chapter says Luke 21:25 through 26 is a complicated substitute for Matthew 24:29 through 30 or Mark 13:24 through 25. Luke rewrote Matthew 24:29 through 30 with an allusion to Isaiah 5:30 from a Greek version having a similar meaning to the darkening of the moon, sun, and stars. He paraphrases Isaiah 5:30 and even adds a clause of interpretation. The clause of interpretation that Luke inserted shows that Jesus was talking about metaphorical darkness or anguish, not literal darkening of the heavenly bodies. If anybody interprets the darkening of the sun, moon, and stars in Matthew 24 or any other similar scripture literally, he's ignoring Luke. Furthermore, some authors have agreed with some of my opinions in this chapter. For example, John Chrysostom, born AD 347, said that the darkness of Isaiah 5:30 is metaphorical, signifying fear, although he didn't associate that passage with Luke. Cornelius a Lapide, 6th, 17th century, called the darkness of Isaiah 5:30 a hyperbole and referred it to the destruction of Jerusalem by Titus, thus agreeing with Luke that the darkness is not literal. I show below how Luke derived three different parts of Isaiah 21:25 through 26 from verses in Matthew and Isaiah. Luke 21:25, and there shall be signs in sun and moon and stars. This is directly from Matthew 24:29. But immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven. And it is ultimately from Isaiah 13:10. For the stars of heaven and the constellations thereof shall not give their light, the sun shall be darkened in its going forth, and the moon shall not cause its light to shine. So Jesus, in his speech on the Mount of Olives, quoted Isaiah 13:10, or referred to it probably in Hebrew. Matthew 24 preserves it, but Luke is explaining it, and he's shortening all those metaphors about the darkness, just saying, and there shall be signs in sun and moon and stars, making it recognizable, but not giving the reader the whole, all the words so that the reader will jump to conclusions. Luke 21:25 through 26. And upon the earth distress of nations, and perplexity for the roaring of the sea and the billows, men fainting for fear and for expectation of the things that are coming upon the world. This is from a Greek version of Isaiah 5:30, which reads in Brenton's Septuagint, and he shall roar on account of them in that day, is the sound of the swelling sea. And they shall look to the land, and behold, there shall be thick darkness in their perplexity. Luke 21:26, for the powers of the heaven shall be shaken. This is directly from Matthew 24:29, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of the heaven shall be shaken. And it may be ultimately from Isaiah 34:4, and all the host of heaven shall be dissolved, and the heavens shall be rolled together as a scroll, and all their host shall fade away, as the leaf fadeth from off the vine, and as a fading leaf from the fig tree. Luke 21:25 through 26 reads, and there shall be signs in sun and moon and stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, in perplexity for the roaring of the sea and the billows, men fainting for fear and for expectation of the things which are coming upon the world, for the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. The words I typed in bold above represent Matthew 24:29. Even though the words in Matthew are close to the very words of Jesus, Luke didn't want to copy the misunderstood language word for word. The three kinds of heavenly phenomena have the same meaning anyway. The words inside brackets include a rewording of part of Isaiah 5:30 and also Luke's own explanatory comments. And the information that remains about explaining Isaiah 5:30 and how it is that I know that Luke was referring to that are very complicated, so I'll end here and wait till the next episode, the next video.